Welcome and congratulations. You have discovered another meta egg. Yay! Where we talk about the meta aspects of pop culture. The cool thing about looking for meta eggs is that you can go back retro and talk about anything. You don't have to talk about the nonsense that everybody else is talking about. But to do that, we have to bring in an expert. My friend Frank Zero, no relationship to Mike Zero, is here with us today. As you can see, he is an expert on UFO comics, history, sync, magic, and homeboy is smart as hell. Please welcome Frank
Sir,
Zero.
good morning, sir. Thank you for that intro. Next
Now,
time,
like I say, Frank
WCW
has
like
given me a list of cartoons to overview and and to cap off a certain theme with the ones he's given to us. I'm just going to go and flat out say it. We're talking about shape-shifting reptiles.
which is
Now,
something that, yes, sir.
no, go ahead, man. I want
Oh,
to.
which is something that's very strange because it goes from these very kind of extreme corner, or what used to be extreme corners of the UFO, the abduction phenomenon, and people seeing these shape-shifting reptilians. And then, of course, we have the work of people like David Icke or Ancient Aliens authors or whatever that seem to note that we've been dealing with these reptilians or shape-shifting reptilian humanoid beings or aliens at least since our ancient civilizations, and then having many of these reptilian types as gods and overseers of civilization and things like that. And then for some reason in the 80s and 90s, right about the time that this thing about reptilians, maybe in politics, the deep state or whatever, is picking up a little energy, all of a sudden every single child's cartoon from G.I. Joe to what
What
we'll be watching
you mentioned
today.
David Icke. I think. Hold on,
Yeah,
man. Like,
sure.
I got to get relaxed
Sure.
because David Icke is probably the best place to. So, because mythology is one thing, but David Icke, for first off, give me a breakdown of who he was for people who don't know.
Surely. So he
He
was,
he's still around.
yes, he is still around. So he was a sports author, a football writer, sort of in England, and then
Soccer. I thought he was a professional soccer player, wasn't he?
it
Maybe.
was soccer, buddy. I was saying football because they call it
Well, it is
football.
football for them, but he
What I
was
mean
he a
is,
writer or was he an actual like athlete?
I don't know if he was ever actually. I think he played when he was younger or something, but he was much more like a newscaster about soccer. So he was like their one of their top newscasters on just that subject, or I guess he would do breakdowns of individual players. I'm really not sure because unfortunately I didn't spend a lot of time looking into his sports career. But shortly after he had these deep, meaningful spiritual experiences which connected him with the planet and natural energies and much bigger psychedelic consciousness kind of ideas. And he went on a TV show claiming that like everyone, we are all sons of God, or we are all a part of God. And he was saying that he was a son of God in that way, in the sense that he had been given information he feels he needed to spread for the betterment of mankind. He was totally made fun of on a show in England, and this is the beginning of kind of crapping on his career. So right when he comes out and says, I figured some things out, some big universal truths, everyone's like, so you're saying you're Jesus? And he's like, oh, not really. And so, oh, he thinks he's Jesus. And so that was the end of that. Then his reputation was destroyed then. Then he wrote at least, I want to say 15 books. I know there's at least 5 or 6 very prominent ones, like Children of the Matrix, which would track everything from ancient history and the reptilian involvement in ancient history all the way up to the modern deep state and these royal bloodlines where the reptilians perhaps still existed and still controlled the world through today's royal families and deep state and things like that. And then the books would go all the way into the abduction stuff. They'd go all the way into microchipping people in abductions and technology organizations that were looking a little too far into what we now know is a very clear and present 1984 Brave New World kind of situation we're running into with the technocracy. And though he didn't connect the two, the aliens or the reptilians and the technology, his books really outline well all the facets that those bloodlines are involved in, and even explore the idea that if they're not physical reptilians, perhaps they're using just the reptilian part of the brain and a lot of black magic. And what this essentially does is you're using those instincts and those base kind of villainy that's stuck in the human shadow in the lowest, oldest part of our brain. And you're saying, I'm going to make huge wars happen. I'm going to control money throughout the globe. I'm going to destroy the planet this way, that way, and that way with these corporations. And I'm going to take the energy from all that suffering and I'm going to empower myself financially to even curse the world with more suffering and control even more of it. And if they're not reptilian aliens, then they're definitely very evil people who function only on the reptilian vibration, the reptilian mindset. Now, he's gotten in a ton of trouble, and I've argued with people for years.
Well, I think I might have lost you there for a second, but that's fine because I think I know where you were going and what you were saying. However, I want to kind of go back and talk about the interdimensional aspects. So let's see here. I'm going to go to our private chat and let's see. Hello there. Hey, Skywalker Academy is joining us from the chat room to talk about shape-shifting reptiles. Now, Skywalker Academy, I know that you're more into Star Wars. However, I think that there is a deep serpentine presence in the lore of Star Wars also. Let's see if Frank is still around. Hank Zero. He has ditched out on us, but that's fine. So what I meant to make a focus here on is two aspects. One of the G.I. Joe main themes is them turning basically the whole world into a reptile. Now, the shape-shifting reptile is actually Cobra Commander, who turns out to be part of this alien race. He was a scientist for them. And then he basically creates under their tutelage the super terrorist organization called Cobra. The original alien planet was called Cobra La. It was like almost like an Atlantean or Lemurian idea. I still don't see that Frank is back with us. Hopefully he finds his way. There are shapeshifters in Star Wars. Just, well, of course there is. I mean, and what is that? The Attack of the Clones, right? And she's almost a reptile too, now that you mention it, right? Because when she reverts back after being killed by Jango, she does it in the same typical way that you see. I know that not all shapeshifters are reptiles, but I like to say that that's like kind of a trope, and it's a deep mythology, and the whole idea that there's like this sacred race of reptiles that are smarter than we are and control everything we do, that come from a different dimension, which is really strong. Not so strong in this one, but in the next film that we'll look at here, Conan, for sure. But then the third one that we'll look at, which is Spider-Man from 1994, that's what they basically do is the lizard. And even in the Amazing Spider-Man movie series, the lizard tries to change everybody into lizards, as if lizards are a step up. Looks a little scary, or frog-like skinned. Let's see here. Yeah, Zam looks a little scaly or frog-like. And she's almost like amphibious, right? But if we're going to analyze the G.I. Joe here, they're just not reptiles either. They're more like crabs, or there's like an insect aspect to them also. Let's see. Frank. Zam Weasel. Ooh, Wessel. One of my favorite jokes about Star Wars is the fact that the Emperor wanted to kill Palpatine, so he got Dooku to do it, but Dooku did not want to do it, so he got Jango to do it. And Jango didn't want to do it, so he got Zam to do it. Zam didn't want to do it, so Zam sent the droid. The droid didn't want to do it, so it sent the damn caterpillars. All right, let's see here. Frank, 0. I'm moving on. So what I show here is only a part of the G.I. Joe lore. This video only shows basically the first part of them trying to use these phallic plant rockets. We died. Link totally not working. Well, let me see. I'll re-invite you then, bro. Invite. Copy. Paste. While we're doing this, I want to thank everybody that might be watching this post live and still enjoying our technical difficulties. Anyways, after they send the spores, basically Cobra is betrayed, or Cobra La is betrayed by Cobra Commander. Now, the weird thing is that, and what I think the point that Frank would like to make would be that up until this point, G.I. Joe was normal. That this was kind of out of left field, turning it into a more, I don't know if they were trying to compete with He-Man or what, but it no longer, for decades, G.I. Joe was sourced in this reality-based terrorist Americana. That was what it was. That's what it is. And all of a sudden now we have a whole new line of toys that are more science fiction based. This was 1987, if I remember correctly. And that led to a string of the same thing in the 1990s, including this one right here, which is Conan the Adventurer. Now, Conan the Adventurer is from a franchise that has a history dating all the way back to the 30s, including comic books and live action movies. But the Adventurer was 1994. Internet down. Give me a second. He's fine. You're fine. Things happen, Frank. It's what it is. Conan, though, story was definitely rewritten. I've looked into this a little bit here. We'll move over here to, I can look up the history of Conan because I think that it's important. In the old school version of Conan, I think the character was not so much focused on raising a god that was snake like he is in the movie Conan the Barbarian, and in the Conan the Adventurer series he was more trying to resurrect aspects of a monkey god. And why they changed that, I think, is where the paranoia starts, is the conspiracy theories is, and what Frank is basically saying, that the stories were intentionally changed to like saturate. Now, whether or not, I don't know, maybe it was just a popular trend, but he's definitely onto something. G.I. Joe wasn't always about shape-shifting reptiles, and then it was. And Conan the Barbarian was not necessarily about a snake god, but like an ape god. Wouldn't that be right? So why the change in the 80s? Let's see. Frank, internet down. He's still down. That's fine. But this is definitely, I mean, these conspiracy theories have led to, you know, the whole fad online. Well, let's see. We'll go back further. In 1960, there was this idea called Operation Mind Bleep. Well, it's mind fuck, but we'll say mind bleep if I have to. Operation Mind Fuck. Operation, where it was a counterculture idea to make everybody think that the Illuminati were responsible for everything. Obviously, it worked because it was like basically a Q operation. Now it's associated with QAnon. Oh, that's so bad. It's basically propaganda used to mean getting people to believe stuff. One of their, that's what it's saying basically right there. Mind control, satanic ritual. So it was not necessary. Maybe it was true. Maybe it was just a spoof and trying to make people believe certain ideas. However, what happened in the beginning of the internet was that a lot of big corporations were being accused of being Illuminati, like shell companies, or basically trying to control the world using. Oh, Frank's back. Hi, Frank.
Hey, man.
We
Sorry, I
were
was
just
in the
talking
middle of
about advertisement.
Yeah. Should I catch the rest of that David Icke explanation, or?
Oh yeah, go for it. You can say what I mean, because it basically has to go from David Icke, which was basically in the 90s, right? Then we go directly into people accusing all kinds of major companies of being formed by reptiles.
Yeah, so I was just saying that I don't know if you guys heard this, so forgive the redundancy. I don't know when the internet cut out, but however, if you understand that David Icke wrote all these different books after the sports thing and after saying he was the son of God, and that these books get into ancient history and they get into modern technology and all these other things. Now, the biggest complaint and argument that Icke has had, and the reason he keeps getting forced into the conspiracy theorist vault instead of information that may be valid on certain pages and other pages maybe not, instead of any kind of real analysis, everybody was just like, okay, he's another whack conspiracy theorist. The idea is that everyone was bringing up the argument that he was using reptiles as a dog whistle to the Jews, and they say that the protocols of the wise men of Zion and all this anti-Jewish thing, all these anti-Jewish sentiments going back to blood libels and all this other stuff, this propaganda continues through people like Icke, who just uses reptilians to replace the word Jews. Now, Icke has heard this argument and came back rather immediately and said, no, what I'm talking about is at least the reptilian brain, these people who get energy and do black magic to gain the blood energy from massive wars and massive suffering, and they use all that energy to gain more and more power. They're, the bad guys. But Ike was saying that he at no point was even pointing out Jews specifically, as I always know, at the very top of the deep state and at the top of these organizations, you have different people with different interests, with different backgrounds. Sure, the Jews may be more predominant in Hollywood and banking or something like that, but in no way was Ike ever saying that all this stuff I'm talking about actually just means the Jews. The Jews are completely separate from his argument. So I wanted to clear that up because so many people hear the name Ike and they go, I'm gonna stop listening right now because this person
Anti-Semitism or whatnot. But
this person secretly is trying to blow the whistle about
for the
Jews.
record, we're not necessarily saying we're almost using conspiracy theories as entertainment in this way, and we're basically just we're taking pop culture and we're showing like how the two coincide, so to speak, and that.
So when you look at the cartoons,
our search for meta eggs corresponds to your search for things going above and beyond, like their intent or original IP, so to speak. Like
right. So when you look at all the entertainment and all the 80s and 90s cartoons or movies and stuff like that, you can see very clearly that what the cartoons are trying to tell kids watching is not, hey kids, all these bad guys are secretly Jewish. What they're actually saying is that they are trying to bring other reptilian beings from other dimensions. They have control of the pyramids and ley lines. They've been here since ancient civilizations, and perhaps their bloodline still rules in the blue blood families and things across the world, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. These things you always hear. The people that are mainly and entirely in power when it comes to, like, now we're looking at the motives of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and these people, Bill Gates and whatever. But it's the same agenda that has always been related to black magic and reptilians. And any group can fit into the bad guys once they get that bit. And there's really no point where they go, actually, if you take the mask off the transdimensional shape-shifting reptilian beings, you're going to find a Jew there. The Jews are completely uninvolved. So I just wanted to
Well, then
clear
stop
up
saying Jew, man.
why
You trying to get us like red flagged or something? What's wrong with you?
that's probably what happened and why we were taken off the internet. But I did want to clear it up because I didn't want to slight it and leave people watching this and going, oh, what they're actually saying is go read Ike and then that equals
Oh well.
this. What we're actually
Well,
saying is exactly what we're talking about.
right.
Reptilians and beings that are, that we see right now on Conan and all
Jews
these
set
different shows.
aside, there's actual like pyramids and stuff. Definitely Egypt is represented. There's this idea that the interdimensional, we were talking about that earlier while you were gone. The interdimensional aspect kind of runs through all of the different scenarios in a way, almost like preparing this dimension for reptiles or turning everybody in this reptile in this dimension into reptiles so that the reptiles can live amongst us or whatever. That idea kind of penetrates over and over as some sort of trope.
Well, the common theme is they need us to build a portal or a stargate or an altar for them to come through to their world. And they can trick us into building. This is kind of what Roswell turns into Lucifer's technology is about. They can trick us into taking the gifts from, in real life, taking the gifts and the technology we find in crash UFOs and back engineering them. And this whole time we're thinking we're going to get lasers, we're going to get Kevlar. This is what we'll get from the UFO crashes. We're going to take this technology and use it in corporate means and in public means, and everyone can have a little piece of the technology. What we didn't realize is that everyone's being infected with this thing, with this building this artificial matrix that is their world. Their way to contact us is through technology. I'm speaking about aliens in general. So then if we look at all these cartoons, like you were saying, the themes are taking over the light lines, taking over the grid energy of the earth by using the ancient sites where that energy is concentrated, like the pyramids in any part of the world. And so all the cartoons in this era have, like G.I. Joe, Conan, show individually taking over all that ley line energy and taking over the globe. But then all the other episodes have little other aspects of how they're infiltrating our dimension. And we are still just talking about the reptilian
It's totally in
beings.
Conan, which I don't think is part of the original lore. The cartoon is based off of every time they kill one of these lizard people, they go back to their dimension, and there's literally like a portal that opens right above their bodies and sends them back, which is just bonkers when you think about it. Like that's how they handled the bad guy, and that Saturday morning idea of killing too many Cobra people, like nobody ever gets hit in G.I. Joe because they don't want people to die. They somehow got around killing people by turning them into lizard people who zap back to their original dimension whenever you kill them. I don't know if that was problem solving,
but also G.I. Joe and Conan, like you were saying, were not their original writers and their original creators, Robert E. Howard and Larry Hama. They in no way put anything about reptilians or portals or any of that. And people who made the cartoons in the 90s decided we're going to take these different licenses and we're going to insist that the whole mythology, their whole world and mission is about fighting these beings that are trying to come through to our world. Now, in Conan, it's very direct. You see the portal above a dying reptilian and gets sucked up into there and his clothes are left or whatever. But that's older, ancient, archaic Conan world. In G.I. Joe and in Ninja Turtles, you see them actually using technology on the World Trade Center to build a larger portal or a universal portal, or like Shredder under the World Trade Center trying to build the portal for them to come through, or Baxter building the portal on the World Trade Center. It happens repeatedly in Ninja Turtles, but it happens in Gargoyles and every other series from
it's
that
over
era.
and over. I mean, really, let's see. This is our third show. The first show we handled a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If I remember correctly, it was the World Trade Center. And then after that, it was the alien invasions are usually faked. And now we're on the reptiles. But over that span, like what we were talking about with the pyramids come up over and over and over. It's like every kid cartoon from the 80s and 90s involved some sort of like ancient power structure, involved with pyramids. And then a lot of people who have associated the World Trade Center with a pyramid, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle one, does it right on the spot, where it hooks into the power of the World Trade Center in the same way that Conan did, as some sort of portal over the New York City. And this is the same exact way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's wild. It's wild.
Well, if we think of the World Trade Center as kind of like a tuning fork,
Right.
perhaps changing or manipulating the vibration of that is the best place to have the major portal to invade, let's say, the US or something with some infiltrators from another dimension. But the pyramids are also significant and always shown as like the parameters of the grid energy of the planet. So it's like they're trying to change the tuning fork of the World Trade Center and New York as this hotspot to let the beings in. And then they have other portals and things, but usually the pyramids, even in Thundercats, are to show the possession of a given continent, the ley line energy that's going on there. Hey there, Wayne. I just happened to see your comment while I'm rambling. How are you doing, buddy? I appreciate you showing up for the show. So it's weird because, like I'm saying, Conan is so old and archaic that the reptilians are just out and about everywhere, whereas the shows showing the actual 90s or the present time the shows were made in shows them in more of a covert way. Even if you skip reptilians, you go to Wildcats with the Damonites, the implanting in the third eye and everything. It's very, very similar concept of technological or alien possession. But the thing you have to look for, and the thing you were just explaining, is that in all these shows, the themes repeat to a preposterous degree. Like they just literally copy the same thing into all the shows. They may have other episodes that are similar, like they have a cloned version of all the good guys. They have to fight their evil clones, but that's still so much less common than the ley line, the reptilians, the whatever. And in that, you have to understand that simply writers moved from one show to the other, some of which, like one guy started with the Star Trek animated when he was like 13 years old. He wrote the Kukulkan, the whole Mexican pyramid, trying to show the Star Trek crew how the ancient gods formed the civilization we have on the Earth and stuff like that. And that writer would then go on to Ninja Turtles season 10 with the aliens and dimensions, and he would go on to Defenders of the Earth to write the exact same kind of plots. And even people I'm friends with, like David McDermott, would go between Ben 10 and X-Men and all these other shows and be either keeping the exact same plot or that kind of intention to go, we're going to use an ancient civilization. We're going to say the bad guys are trying to harness this kind of energy or bring themselves through some kind of portal, and the good guys have to go to Tibet or wherever they are on the earth where they decided to make this portal and make their kind of home base. I think that Cobra is interesting because you see them industrially try all of this separately. Whereas the other shows, the villains only get up to some of these things, and they don't have the kind of resources that Cobra does. But in Conan and G.I. Joe, there's just this overwhelming opposing force of reptilians. It's very clear. You know, there's not, like in Conan, there's not a lot of other type of villains, uh, unless it's like a single being that comes in for an episode to wreak some havoc, and Conan has to fight him. Everything belongs to that reptilian plot. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the whole theme of it is basically that's the main boss. But if there's a lot to Conan because there's 2 seasons, and I mean the one episode that we were just looking at, which is right here, is episode 62 of
Right.
season 2. So
Yeah.
it basically wraps up everything. There's like a 3-part or maybe even a 4-part series called Serpent, Coils, the Earth, and it's
Yeah.
basically the whole. I couldn't this one episode took so much out of me. I couldn't imagine watching so many different
Well,
versions or the
I
same
can promise
theme.
the people at home that if they just go right now and turn on Conan episode 1, and if they just make it to like episode 3 or 4, they'll already be astounded. It's potent throughout the entire series. Now, like G.I. Joe,
Horrifying.
you'll start to get to those world coils, the Earth, take over the pyramids, take over space stations. It gets a lot further than that, but they all have that kind of common thing repeating. And I just want to say for the listeners, like, this wasn't a case of 3 writers of cartoons. obsessing over David Icke. This is a case of David Icke came out with all this information, and then separately the 80s and 90s media was obsessed with getting kids to understand the interdimensional portal, the shapeshifters, perhaps the false flag, alien invasion, these things that Werner von Braun and military insiders have told us would come in the form of a false flag invasion or anything else. The Nazis might have gotten really far. We know they talked to Aldebaran and the Vril women and everything, but maybe they had a connection with the reptilians. It became so potent. They were the first ones to use massive blood rites. But that's kind of ridiculous because you go back to Mesoamerica and everything, and there's these sacrifices related to the gods, related to blood rites. So it seems like those have been around in civilization.
Did I lose you? I hope I didn't lose you. Oh,
In
there
the
you
90s.
go.
No, sir.
You're
Can you
kind
still
of
hear me?
hiccuping a little bit.
Okay.
Slow down. Don't move your phone too much. There you go. And when you move your phone too much, you cut in and out.
I got you, bud.
Well, so the next cartoon that we gathered was the first episode from the first season of Spider-Man, the animated series, which was called the Night of the Lizard. Of course, that's pre the 2010s Lizard movie. However, I wanted to point out that the Lizard is an old character. That's from 1963. So
yeah,
it's not, but I don't know if it fits into the same category as sort of like the rewrite of G.I. Joe and the rewrite of Conan.
Not exactly, because this is one episode with a reptilian being. It doesn't introduce an army and dimension of reptilian Spider-Man's going to be dealing with forever. But in every version of Spider-Man, there are reptilians, and they're not always Dr. Connor. So Dr. Connor is really like this isolated character that happens to be a shape-shifting lizard, but there's reasons scientifically he turns himself into a lizard and so forth. There's not a whole etheric world instructing him to bring through other reptilian beings. So it is kind of isolated.
He's definitely trying to make everybody a reptile, though. That was the focus of this cartoon specifically, in the same way that it shows the G.I. Joes trying. Okay, so G.I. Joe basically does the same thing, right? G.I. Joe gets down to the point where it's trying to turn the world into what they're turning him into. So they use these spores right here to turn Cobra Commander into like part man, part lizard. Like he literally becomes a lizard. And then,
but he was also picked. They also picked him as the human. They explain this in another part of the movie. He was going to be the first shapeshifter that could go from the underground caverns in the reptilian civilization to actually make it into the human public, perhaps gain political power, and really get their foot in the door of the civilization above them, the human civilization where they lived. Dr. Connor, and correct me if I'm wrong, was trying to make a serum to turn everybody into reptilians because he was kind of butthurt about being a reptilian himself. He wasn't trying to make an army or a bunch of worshippers.
No, he does it because he thinks it will heal everybody. In fact, the first person he wants to turn into this is his wife, because she's like, oh, you'll be better. Reptiles are better. They don't feel pain. You'll be able to grow your limbs. Like the pain won't be the same as it will be for us, which is a very interesting concept.
Yeah. So
I mean, is that brainwashing to a certain extent? Or are the reptiles better, so to speak?
Yeah, I think so. So I think, again, like whoever created Dr. Connor in '63 or whatever, I think it was an innocent, what if we have a reptilian doctor kind of guy. And then once it becomes a cartoon thing, they're figuring, how can we make this the same theme like all the other cartoons where they want to turn everyone, or we're making the reptilians look more powerful, more buff, taller, they can regrow limbs or whatever. This is kind of, I don't know, reptilian propaganda, shape-shifting propaganda. I don't know where it fits exactly.
Wayne in the chat room basically said transhumanism. He says an early variant of transhumanism, which is
that was the word I was going to use. And thank you, Wayne. I don't know whether I'm trying to explain how we're all kind of getting horny and want to turn into technological marvels, or whether I'm explaining that this was always a reptilian plot and they see themselves as predominant the way that Nazis did, with their own set of propaganda and things to tell us to make them think they're super beings. Thanks for that, Wayne, because it was literally the word I was going to use. And then I was like, I keep delving into Lucifer's technology and talking about tech, and people are trying to understand reptilians right now. But it's sort of the same thing. You're building a portal, you're building technologies to let them into your world or to let them control aspects of your world. And in a lot of ways, you don't see what's going on. Like with Cobra, he'll make a band that has a mind control element to the music. And there's nothing, someone at that concert isn't going to outwardly go, haha, I think the music's controlling my brain, therefore reptilians. The episode just goes as far as, in this episode, they're using music as mind control. But once you put together the whole curriculum, you see that all the cartoons are very similar, and they are shown as like,
it does seem curricular. It does seem like there's some sort of like systematic, like this is what subjects you go through. And I don't know if I like that feel. Like, I know that's what it feels like. I don't want that to be true, but that seems like there's certain things are hit almost every time.
So if you're a kid and you're changing channels, and you're a kid, and let's say your parents go, you can't watch any Marvel shows, or you can't watch any Disney shows. It's so when you change the channel, you're still watching the tale of reptilian beings taking over people with mind control and opening up their own and you go, I'm tired of this. I'm watching a totally new show now. And you're still gonna run into the faked alien invasion with the thing and whatever. And then you're like, I'm tired of this. I'm gonna go to this totally different show. And they're taking over NASA with a demon using black magic rituals and hypnosis to make everyone at NASA go along with their plans. And so it just never stops between all these shows. And I think that was hyper intentional. Now, I don't know what predictive programming, what kind of world you're preparing people for, when otherwise any talk about this is laughed off as David Icke's imagination. But in the fiction, they're serious as hell about programming people to get all these concepts in, to get this curriculum in their unconscious.
How back does the whole, I mean, it doesn't start with Ike, right? The whole idea of the
not by any means. Not by any means, but there's goofy substarts. So like you have the people who study all these ancient civilizations, and they say, well, of course there were reptilian beings that were part of the gods that helped us with civilization and everything else. And in some cultures, so much more predominant than others. But in the cultures that lack the reptilians, you still have the Nomo, those fish people coming out of the water or whatever to give us civilization.
Oh,
it's not super far from, if it's not the reptilians, some other beings. Yeah. So then you have people that start to write about these ancient cultures. Then in the 1800s, a guy says that he's in New York. He's found a tunnel to the underground worlds and civilizations. This gets into Tartaria and the mud flood. And so you find all these tunnels and places under New York where you can start to build the narrative. Well, this is where the reptilians entered their underground civilization, or this is where humans and reptilians had a mutual space or tunnel before you go into their civilization. But a lot of that was found to be a hoax, and people were just trying to make money off of this idea. They said there was a hidden civilization, there wasn't. Now, just like you're looking at, pulp comics and everything helped this along extremely, the idea of these reptilians and stuff like that. And I think there's many places in history where you can stop and go, well, this guy was just hoaxing and trying to make money off of saying you could mine gold with the reptilians. Or this guy, David Icke, is actually a fool and I don't like him, so I can't possibly decide to sit down and look at his books or whatever. You still have so many other groups and individuals or even tribes with these narratives of these reptilian beings, like you do with a Bigfoot or something like that. So do we cut all of that out of hundreds of years of history and just go, well, let's just look at the cartoons? Or can we kind of understand that
so
been
look,
this forever?
I've tracked this down. Okay, it says origins. Michael Barkin, professor of political sciences at Syracuse University, posits that the idea of a reptilian conspiracy originated in the fiction of Conan the Barbarian creator Robert E. Howard in his story, The Shadow Kingdom. Now, listen to this. Published in Weird Tales in August 1929, the story drew on theosophical ideas of the lost worlds, sort of like Atlantis or Lemuria, particular Helen Blavatsky's The Sacred Doctrine, written in 1888, with its reference to dragon men who once had a mighty civilization on a Lemurian continent. Is that what Blavatsky said?
Well, Blavatsky had the idea of the root races and these other races, and some were blended with extraterrestrials, and she traveled around the world to these sacred places like Tibet, and so did Nicholas Roerich and his wife, who I'm forgetting the name of, but the Theosophists were responsible for both spiritually contacting these other type of beings and ascended masters and stuff like that, and then coming out with a whole narrative of where all our races and cultures came from. Now, of course, this was largely violently, obnoxiously hijacked by the Nazis, and people can't look at Blavatsky today
Right.
and say anything besides she might have been anti-Semite or she might have been a half a Nazi, but none of these things existed in her world, really. She was just sort of organizing the spiritual and the cultural energies into charts that other occultists and theosophists could understand in the future. And as much as she uses terms like root races and things like that, I think there's still a lot of valuable stuff in what she was writing that shouldn't be immediately thought of as just where the Nazis got their ideas. It was a whole bunch of ideas that the Nazis took from all kinds of things and wound up hijacking a lot of positive, constructive human ideas in the long run for their, very quick, very violent experiment with knocking entire races out and trying to find a purified version of those. And it's interesting when you look at the people who came up with the Vril and the Thule and the Black Sun and Blavatsky's ideas in theosophy and how they can still be maturely separated but aren't. So people just want to say, I don't need to know any more about Blavatsky. She influenced the Nazis. I don't need to know any more about Ike. Somewhere on the internet it said that he was just talking about the and you get my point. So these sources are thrown away with quick cultural decisions about that has something to do with the bad guys, so it'll never be worth it. None of her, 12 books will ever be worth reading or whatever because we thought one page was talking about this. It's
Yeah, I mean,
preposterous. But it's what they do with Ike because he's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of, historical information, symbolic information, and everyone just goes, well, he said he was Jesus once, so I don't even care if that's a misinterpretation. It's
that's
over. I
always an
can't ever
issue.
read anything he says. What's that, buddy?
So I said that's always an issue as soon as someone says that they're Jesus. Now so I've tracked down the Shadow Kingdom by Robert E. Howard, but what they say is that it's singular. It's the only one that talks about lizard men and the whole collection of everything he wrote. But that's more proof to your thesis because that means basically that's the one aspect that people continually pull out of for the whole mythos of Conan and up until the adventure when they base it all around the Serpent Men.
Right.
Okay, so in this one they revealed that Serpent Men, an ancient pre-human race who had founded Valusia, but were almost extinct, ruled from the shadows, using the snake cult religion and ability to disguise themselves with magic. They intend to replace Cole with a disguised Serpent Man, just as they had done with his predecessors. So boom, right there. They're using magic to shapeshift. But that's even what they tried to do in the new G.I. Joe series. Yeah, I'm really hyped about G.I. Joe because G.I. Joe is like making a surging comeback. It's going to be like wrapped up with Transformers here, and it's going to have that more 80s style that we loved pre-Serpent Men. But that's what they do, right? They have the Zoltar or Zartan, the guy from G.I. Joe who basically like can manipulate his appearance. And the same way all of these other, like the lizard people from V basically have like a fake mask on. but he takes over the government in the name of Cobra, and Cobra you could kind of see as like just the overarching idea of like a shadowy a shadowy serpent men cult who's trying to take over the government or oh man, that's messed up. That's messed up,
So
man.
like Zartan is like Cobra's Blackwater. So it's like his private army, a group of mercenaries. They can't really be out in the sun. They have kind of shape-shifting problems. We'd assume they have some of the skills and the power of reptilians, and that's why they chose them to be kind of their hitmen or their group of mercenary, their Blackwater, their private army, if you will. But it's weird because it seems that a lot of Cobra soldiers are just humans that have been like recruited into a type of army. But then Cobra Commander and this whole lineage he comes from are real reptilians that live underground. But then Zartan and his boys are like hybrids, kind of like Cobra Commander, to that were kind of genetically designed to go up on the surface area and be able to survive and take on missions and things like that. It's really interesting if you get to see the Cobra Commander's origin in this movie we're watching clips from right now. They kind of explain how the reptilian scientists got together and made Cobra Commander like this representative that could go out in the human world. I know I just kind of explained that, but if you watch the sequence, it's rather important. But still, we're coming back to this point where Robert E. Howard wasn't obsessed with reptilians, but
No,
for the
it was
cartoons of the
it was
90s,
one
guys had
thing that has been picked up over multiple fantasy artists and highlighted and then used in the 80s and 90s as almost like you said, some sort of curriculum.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's with all
fascinating.
the other shows. It doesn't, you can't take other Conan stuff and go, let me learn more about the reptilians. I mean, you can a little, but it's more, let me
One
compare to
story,
G.I.
one
Joe.
story from 1930. One.
Right.
And I mean that gives birth to what they specifically say right here. It says the Cthulhu mythologies. So H.P. Lovecraft, who was, I mean, all of his stuff basically has secret cults running around in robes and
And
using magic to
dimensional portals to let other beings in. So it's the same
right.
thing with the black magic cults and everything. There was even a part of this where they were explaining the only thing he wrote about reptilians, and a little further down the wiki it said that this council he was trusting and consulting was actually all shape-shifting reptilians. So like even if you don't engage with the reptilians, you learn later somewhere in the story that the humans that are part of a political hierarchy or a secret hierarchy are actual reptilians. So it's like parts of the story you might not pick up while reading it. No, there's just a bunch of black magic people he's talking to. No, they're trying to open their portal to the reptilian world and they're reptilians.
This is fascinating right here. It says historian Edward Guillemot has argued that the reptilian conspiracy theory, particular as expounded by Icke, drew from earlier pseudo historical legends developed during the colonization of Africa.
Uh-huh.
And then what is this? Some sort of mythical water-dwelling entity that is believed to exist in the Congo River Basin.
A cryptid, but also a spirit.
Yeah, but it kind of smells like the Lost World in the X-Men lore,
Sure.
like the
Yeah,
whole
absolutely.
Land of the Lost idea, sort
The
of.
Savage Land.
Savage Land, right?
Lost World is a
Well,
show that references a very similar world from the 80s, right?
right. Land
Yeah.
of the Lost,
Land of the
but
Lost. Sorry, Lost
but
World.
it
What the hell?
also has like little reptile people. I mean, it
Yeah.
does, right? It does. It
Yeah, yeah,
totally
yeah.
does.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Let's see. Land of the Lost Reptiles. This is what we do, baby.
And at home, if you're bored, Star Trek reptilians, Doctor Who reptilians, Star Wars,
yeah.
Star Wars
Bring
reptilians. I mean, just keep going, have fun.
Let's see. Images of Land of the Lost Reptiles. Yeah, there they
There we
are.
The what are they called? The squeegee diddlies, the cribbly
Squibbly
boos,
GGs.
something like that.
They do. They have like a particular name, don't they? I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a goofy name.
Stacks. The
There
Slee
you are.
Stacks are a
Couldn't
bipedal
be
species of
goofier than
reptilian humanoids that are indigenous to the land. That is
yes,
right.
sir.
So what
Yes.
was the other one? Was like Star Trek reptile, Star
Star
Trek.
Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars. You can literally try any giant science fiction you're a fandom. You're a
Yeah,
part
somebody
of.
said while you were gone that they started talking about Zam Weasley, Skywalker Academy said that is the, or Weasel, is the one that is the one that they used to try to kill Padme as a shape-shifting reptile.
Okay, yeah, I'm reading Skywalker's Academy right now. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's cool, huh? It's dope.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
see the Slee stack, but then also the ones from the Land of the Lost and the Star Trek reptile might be the same costume. Let's see.
Close. Hey,
Star Trek.
there's that Star Trek animated episode with Kublai Khan that David Wise wrote when he was 13. That image in the top right was from that.
Oh yeah, right. It's a
Not to
reptile
stop
monster.
you or
But
slow you down.
we're gonna have to do the Star Trek series because one of the first things they do on that Star Trek, the animated series, is they yeah, there it is. That guy.
Yeah.
The Gorn.
Yes.
Gorn.
That
So
drawn
yeah,
out
because
Shatner fight.
one of the first animated things for Star Trek was they tried to use black magic to open up a portal. It's really out of like place for the science of Star Trek. Is the
Well, Kirk had to fight Asmodeus to free Lucifer. So
oh
Spock taught him how to draw a pentagram around him and use
yes.
psychic powers to move things at a distance. So then Kirk has like a weather war with Asmodeus, who was permanently stuck in Salem, Massachusetts, with Lucifer, a goat-like being who's also trying to get the Star Trek crew hip to magic. He's
Wild.
called Lucifer, Lucifili. He's called Lucifer, Luca Happy France. It's not directly Lucifer, but you know what they meant. Yeah, there we
The
are, the Doctor Who guys.
Surians. Let's see.
Silurians? Silurian? Yeah, there we are.
Let's take a look at the. Oh my God.
Those guys. Yeah, they're pleasant. Yeah, homegirl right there. Homegirl's a lot easier to look at than the other members of her species, but
Wow. That's a okay.
so then when Star Trek talks about archons, they're talking about like a simulated world controlled by a computer. But Star Trek talks about archons and reptilians separately. I think Doctor Who does as well. If any Star Wars fans know of two different references there, feel free to hop in the chat.
The concept of Archon lizard people refers to a belief that a group of reptilian beings, often referred to as Archons, are said to be controlling humanity and manipulating world events.
Now, if you look up
Okay,
Ahriman, if you look up Ahriman, Ahriman.
Ahriman?
It's Ahriman.
A-H...
Riman.
Alright.
And just type Archon for the heck of it. Oh, or never mind. It doesn't matter. Oh, you still had the word reptilian in there, I believe, which is fine, or lizard people rather. Yeah, if you just go Ahriman Archon, just look that up.
Ahriman.
Or Ahriman by himself. It's all good.
Is that fine?
Yeah, so this is a evil spirit, as it just referred to it, or a being that essentially takes on the responsibilities of the Archons before we had the term Archon, but Ahriman wants to lead us to a technological downfall. He wants us to obsess with technology and leave the conscious psychic world and move entirely into a technological matrix artificial space, where again, he's a being that's trying to get us to open a portal to essentially they want us all to open portals and use technology so that we're forced into their world so that they can exchange with us through technology. And so
Oh,
without the reptilian bit, we have
but
something identical.
so, it's the idea of like a simulated reality in the same way that like the Matrix bad guys are like vampires, so to speak. They're kind of like,
The strangers from Dark City are the best representation. Just like the Men in Black are some kind of
right.
weird ushers of broken time and synchronicity, and Our world, the strangers in Dark City represent that closed system, that simulation, and they are the archons or the rulers of the simulation. And they can manipulate anyone's consciousness, memory, or physical activity to match the world they want to enact.
Oh man. I had to
But
send
anyway,
something to our friend Andreas. Andreas was on the show not too long ago, and
yeah, I
he'd be
noticed that.
interested in you being on here. Let's see here. In pop culture, the Temple of Ahriman is a 2016 song by Swedish black metal band Dark Funeral.
Okay, that's
uh,
probably groovy.
various incantations appear in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Final Fantasy covers everything.
Yeah, it covers basically all lore, right? It just uses
Yeah,
everything. But this
I
whole
mean, so
idea
does
is
like
that it's like a spirit. It's
Warhammer.
like it uses the but it's the same idea as the archons, right? It's
Yeah,
basically feeding off of people's emotions, or what
yeah,
would you would sometimes call like the reptile brain. Like I
yeah.
wonder if all of this is just like symbolic of man dealing with the reptile nature of his own psyche. I mean, even on
It,
Connor's the lizard, it's made clear that the lizard is somehow like capture or inside of his subconscious. Like it could come back again, even though Connor's already been cured. It still sleeps inside of his brain, and then the
right.
idea that it's the lowest part of our, the reptile brain is what oversees our sexual urges and all of the base
Base
primal
desires.
aspects.
Yeah, so it's like that lowest level chakra, that lowest vibration that we have between basically our crotch and the space between the bottom of our ass and the ground. The thing that
Jesus,
keeps us grounded
very
and gives
poetic,
us
sir.
those base impulses is the energy they wish the whole world, I think, would function at, because that's how they gain energy. They gain energy from our fear and our aggression and things like that. And so if they can keep us in a world of fear and war and conflict. I mean, they have very, very successfully. Rudolf Steiner expanded on the Ahriman concept in his cosmology too. Wayne just added, and I would encourage anyone to look up Rudolf Steiner, who I think has done the most commentary on this sort of thing, really before anybody had any intellectual context for what we're talking about. Rudolf Steiner wrote about, I believe, Ahriman and the Archons separately or together, but I think is a sort of similar force. If you're on YouTube, you can listen rather, to hours of Steiner's work. You could just look up Steiner Ahriman on YouTube, and you'll already have hours of stuff to check out. Oh, there you go, some great quotes. Thanks again, Wayne.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. We'll pick that one up. Our thoughts do not actually exist. They are only pictures. A great error has been made at the end of the last human development period when existence was equated with thinking. Cogito ergo sum is the greatest error ever placed at the head of the modern worldview. If we do not believe within ourselves this deeply rooted feeling that there is something higher than ourselves, we shall never find the strength to evolve into something higher.
So what did the
Uh-huh.
Greys do historically? What did the Greys go through? Well, as far as we know from people like Bob Frizzle or David Icke or contactees or any number of sources, we think that the Greys were their evolution was stymied, was messed up, and their obsession with technology began a process which would make their bodies diminutive, and so the Greys that we see now are a race like humans that for years moved underground and only worked with higher and higher technology to do everything for them. So their bodies, their sex drives, everything became useless. The
Repression,
intellect
anything
became
repressed.
God. They wound up nuking themselves, messing up their genetics forever. And this is why the Greys attempt to give us this parable Don't follow technology to all of its ends. Don't rush technology before your psycho-spiritual nature is evolved. If most of the people on the planet are still on that bottom chakra, still functioning at that reptilian brain, then no, don't embrace nukes and anti-gravity. Wait until you have your heart connected with the earth, connected with the other beings on the earth, with the will to rise in consciousness and have a higher consciousness, a higher seat from which you can see and operate as a human being. And then maybe some technology could help you save some steps and save some time. But at no point should you worship the atom bomb. At no point should you worship the technologies you come up with, thinking that you're God because you've made this intellectual step, when psychospiritually the whole species is being imprisoned on this earth because we can't be trusted to leave and meet anybody else in the universe until we're psychospiritually balanced in that way. Now, you may ask, how did the reptilians and greys, without being balanced in that sense, make their way all over the universe and invade
Hmm.
Earth and all these other things? I don't really know the breakdown there, but I know the greys were looking at a physical body that has failed. They have failed their own evolution process. And that's why they're always saying, hey, you're on the Earth to evolve, so don't blow up the Earth. Check out, keep track of your environment and keep it together. And then as far as having wars and everything, there are people with very low energy motivations doing black magic, so you all fight each other and you all kill each other. Try to make it out of that and the use of giant weapons like nukes, and we'll accept you in the rest of the universe. And that's not just from gray contactees, that's from experiencers and contactees with Pleiades and blonde beings and all types of different grays, reptilians, mantis beings. They all kind of feed us this parable about the one race that messed up, that we're rushing toward if we don't watch ourselves. And this has a lot to do with rushing into AI without any safeguards. It has a lot to do with rushing into Neuralink and making it a part of our bodies before our bodies are evolved enough. Sure, we can have cybernetic arms and be super people, but our brains and hearts are still at the level of, people who are concentration camp guards or in the concentration camps. We need that consciousness to evolve much higher, much freer, much more independent of these kind of survival pangs that keep us in this cycle of destructive karma, so to speak.
Awesome. I just want to go ahead and read this Rudolf Steiner. I mean, it's been on the
Please,
screen for a second, but I'll read it out loud. According to Rudolf
surely.
Steiner, a renowned philosopher and esotericist.
Esotericist.
Esotericist. What do you
Eso.
do for a living? I am an esotericist. Anxiety, depression, and fear can be influenced by hostile spiritual beings that exist in dimensions outside of our ordinary perception, which other dimensions basically would be a symbol for the spiritual realm, right? Like,
Sure.
so when we're talking about like the lizard guys and everything being killed and going to another spiritual dimension, we're just basically talking about heaven. Like other dimensions are like the spiritual realm by
Yeah.
definition, I guess.
Yeah. And I
These
think,
beings fed off of human emotions, particular fear and anxiety, and can have a profound impact on others' lives. Steiner believed that these beings are not physical entities, but spiritual entities that operate in the astral and etheric realms. He suggested that these beings can influence our thoughts, emotions, and actions, and can even possess us if we are unaware of their presence.
so these are etheric parasites. These are what you hear a lot of people talking on TikTok about. They removed an ethereal parasite. They removed some bug-looking weird creature from their own anatomy by fasting and eating certain things and drinking certain things, or working with someone who's a specialist at removing these kind of parasites from our anatomy. We say etheric and we use terms like this because that's where they come from, that's where they feed from, and that's where the energy goes. But they are physical parasites, the ones we understand with the term parasite, living somewhere in our deep intestines or somewhere else until we take steps to remove them from the body. Now, if we don't have these kind of parasites, we have these sort of addictions to screen time or to technology. These addictions have passed up our will to communicate and experience life. We go to a concert, We record the concert for other people to give us likes. We do not experience the concert any longer. We are removing the generations or dying out that had a full life of experiences and memories. And we are moving into a generation that has a full life of recording experiences or having their phone in between the body experiencing the thing and the experience itself. We're always trying to record, always trying to get likes, always trying to get other people's energies into what we're experiencing instead of just living in the moment. The more we do that, the more we move into the technological sort of paralysis where we would never get to if we didn't teach generations to stop talking to people, it's okay to be totally socially distant, but everybody should basically have their phone glued to their face. That's the first technological apparatus we've built that, unlike a video game or something like that, we can't get up from and then go experience life, but in fact have glued to us at all times. Now soon, virtual reality helmets and all this other stuff will get us closer to that dystopian idea about the Greys, where we no longer use our bodies. We don't care to reproduce. Everything is based off this intellectual exchange with the technology. And people can kind of guess where that's going. I don't have to illustrate what future that paints, But it's the reality we're living in.
I mean, I don't think I have any way to argue that. I just want to read this real quick, this reptilian brains, and then we'll kind of I'll give you a moment for conclusion, and then we'll talk about what we'll do next. Okay.
Cool,
where we'll go with our research here. But this is about the reptilian brain. This is basically, I can look to see where it says AI generated answer. So this is off of Brave's AI, the browser that I'm using. Reptile brains, the reptile brain, also known as the primal brain or basal ganglia. Now, the basal ganglia I have found to be within a lot of research involving mind control, whether it be UFOs or MK Ultra. It has to do with the basal ganglia if the rest of the brain is damaged, it can actually still perform tasks. And so there's a lot of theories on if you control the basal ganglia, you can make people do stuff that they won't remember doing. So I guess it's
brain
like the
scarring.
last thing that's still working when you're drunk or whatnot. What'd you
brain
say?
scarring, the whole idea of when you're in the womb or slightly after you come out the womb, brain scarring the reptilian brain in certain ways, which leads to certain personalities and the ability to sort of build in artificial computers that are you use the trauma to create an open blank space, a blank slate in a person's mind, so you can inject all the programming and all the concepts you want them to, even in their deepest unconscious or deepest meditation states, not be able to access or change or review, so that if you just need them to grab a gun one day and freak out and do something, be some throwaway assassin, that stuff is all very, very well protected. Oswald and every serial killer and every U.S. president assassin we've had in the history of this country. No joke. I mean, I can maybe count 3 serial killers
intertwined with the assassin programs that are confirmed through the church committee that happened in like 76. Like MK Ultra and mind control were funded by the United States government. It is not a conspiracy theory, it is fact. How deep it goes is what we speculate on.
Well, where everybody says it ended, that's where it continued, expanded, and got billions of dollars in funding. So everyone says, sometime in the 70s, they shut that down. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden, Britain has Project Talent. We have Project Monarch, and there's millions of people who have gone through either the abduction, the satanic ritual abuse, the family sexual trauma, or some other traumatic experience, which, the Disney Club. Anything that forces that sort of infantile organization of all this mind-controlled data.
So the reptile brain is a part of the brain that is responsible for controlling our most basic instincts and automatic behavior. It is responsible for ensuring our survival and is present in all vertebrates, including humans. The reptile brain is responsible for controlling our fight or flight response, feeding, mating, and other basic bodily functions. In humans, the reptile brain is also responsible for controlling our emotional responses such as anger and aggression. It is, it's a symbolic reference. It is also involved in the regulation of our body's automatic functions, such as heart rate or blood pressure. And I would imagine that would be the endocrine system, right? Like
Yeah.
where our glands and all the chemicals that our body produces, especially if it has to do with breathing, because breathing goes back to those. So this is interesting. The reptile brain is often referred to as the lizard brain because it is thought to be the most primitive part of our brain and is similar in structure and function to the brain of reptiles. It is also sometimes referred to as the reptile brain because it is responsible for our most basic instincts, blah, 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 blah. In terms of its structure, the reptile brain is located at the base of the brain and is made up of several different parts, including the brainstem, the cerebellum, and the basic ganglia.
So to
So,
keep people
aggressive
in
behavior.
that realm, to keep people stuck in that reptilian brain, or to force them to make decisions, quick decisions or large decisions, only from the reptilian brain, to worship the aspects of making everyone function on that wavelength so that you get the energy from the carnage and the aggression and the violence and the sexual perversion, and you can sort of sap all that away from them with dark magics. You don't have to be reptilian. There don't have to be underground shapeshifters or anything. Just that
It could
high,
be
the
just an
hierarchy that
analogy for
controls the
what's
world.
happening in your own brain, like your own. So this further says, it talks about the other part of the brain, which is the neo-mammalian brain, and if anything happens to it, then it goes down to the reptile brain for basically survival instincts, right? But the
Sure.
neo-mammalian brain is what's responsible for higher thinking and cognitive ability. So it would be more of the aspect of God or whatever. Kind of like how Steiner says, if you can't imagine God, how can you like evolve past your reptile brain?
Right. But if you keep everybody at their reptilian brain, how much easier are they to control than people who have evolved so far that that's only one aspect of their reviewable consciousness? In other words, you go to meditate or you go to make a decision and you go, okay, survival and sex and everything, that's over here. And then what I want to do to help humanity and help myself and to grow and make the world a better place, that's over here. And where I am right now in this moment, I can take a breath and I can think or I can act and I can come up with an intention that I think is the right thing to do. But if you're stuck on the reptilian brain, you never make it up to those levels where you're making better decisions and you're breathing. You're breathing the real
You're
way.
controlling your breath instead of being in fight or flight breath or
But if you
hyperventilating or
keep
whatever.
everybody that lives in the ghetto in fight or flight, and everybody that's in
Right,
a war zone in fight or flight, and
right.
everybody in the White House having to make huge decisions about people's lives in seconds in fight or flight, worried about some other thing about electing someone or something, and you keep everyone on that frequency by keeping Fox on, CNN on, give them their opposing football teams, give them their opposing ideologies. We can constantly make it men against women, Asian people against the rest of us, black people against white people,
Some survival.
boomers against younger generations. We can keep pushing that in the media, and people will keep swallowing it and going, should I be worried that as an Asian I'm going to get beat up today? Or as a boomer, a bunch of young kids are going to beat me up? Or is just COVID going to take me out? Or whatever. And all that is keeping people on that survival circuit where you basically only see individuals, artists, or spiritual minded people finding the space to kind of organize it all within themselves and be a higher functioning being. Whereas most people don't have these thoughts, they don't have the literature, they're not meditating, they don't have psychedelics, they don't whatever. Maybe they watched all these reptilian cartoons as a kid, that's in their unconscious, plus some sexual trauma from when they were a kid or whatever, and they're trying to sort that out and they're forever stuck on that survival circuit. So
Right.
we have to, like, as a race, just imagine a different frequency, just a different everything isn't Fox News. The world, nature does not run on that Fox News frequency. Neither does it run on CNN or the opposition between them both. It's a whole other thing, like our consciousness, you know. But there's so many programs kept in place to keep us at that survival level. We kind of never know a difference as a society, you know.
Frank, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your work and more about Saturday Morning Vision Quest?
Sure. So Saturday Morning Vision Quest is a chapter in the Sync Book 2. that I started compiling all this bizarre cartoon information. And then Saturday Morning Quest is also the name of the blog. You can check out where I've gone through a whole bunch of episodes. You can check back episodes of this show with Will and I, where we go through a lot of other specific cartoons. And I've done a lot of, if you just Frank Zero at YouTube or look up my show, The Farm Frank Zero search, basically, we'll bring up a bunch of episodes where I'm talking to Colin Reed or Christopher Knowles or Violator Hellspawn, my closest homie, about hours and hours. We're talking about Doctor Who and cartoons and all these aspects with the reptilians and stuff again. You can find my work generally at Zero Night blog. I have a bunch of other blogs. You can always inquire or whatever. You basically look up Frank Zero or Zero Night, and you can find all my other material. I think that's a bit about. Wait, what was the other thing you asked me to add, Will? I'm sorry.
No, I did Saturday Morning Vision Quest, but you started
Okay.
with that, so like we
Yeah.
just rolled right into it.
Sure.
So basically, what the relationship is you give me a couple of episodes to research. I go and I edit them, then you come back and we kind of review them together. But you've kind of already given me 3 more episodes for another. So what we'll try to do, we tried to do this yesterday, it didn't work. We'll do it now. Who knows when we'll do it again, but we'll try to do it next Saturday morning. But go ahead, and if you remember, Zero Night. Oh, let's see, Zero Night. I think it would be KNIGH.
Knight, as in like a medieval knight. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. So
Well, I mean,
it's
it is a play on words intentionally. It's a play on words. Like there's a name, somebody's name involves the word night. So they just put their names together to make like 0 Point Night, the most darkest.
So that's just Violator and all. So Violator has been, the editor of all the books
Violator
I've
Hellspawn.
written and worked on.
Shout out to Violator, because he helped us put this show together also.
Yeah, he's always been in the Sync community with me as well. He wrote in the first Sync book. We do all the work. Everything we can think of. Very soon we want to start like a video daily kind of podcast thing. And if not, I'm going to start giving daily lectures on TikTok, just about all topics, not just the cartoons. But feel free to always get in touch with me if there's something you're interested in. I'll send you all the material I can about that. This thing we're continuing with Will, I have these themes, just like reptilians or NASA or the New World Order or the faked alien invasion. And I track them through all the cartoons. And the reason we make these is so you can very swiftly go through 3 completely different shows and see how ridiculously similar the episodes and the themes are. And then once we've got a lot of these done, you'll see how this overarching pattern of, 50 shows just with the faked alien invasion, then these kind of things will come out of that organization.
So what are we going to do next?
So next we're doing NASA, I believe, or are we still?
I think so. I think the Spider-Man NASA. We're doing 3 different Spider-Man from different franchises, all involving spider people.
So Spider-Woman
NASA
from
show,
the
everyone.
70s. I'm sorry, buddy. Spider-Woman from the 70s, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends from the 80s, Spider-Man the cartoon from the 90s, Spider-Man Unlimited from a little later in the 90s, and we could even go into more modern Spider-Man incarnations, but we probably won't because we have enough examples there of black magic mixing with NASA. And just there's other weird esoteric episodes of the 70s shows. The Spider-Woman cartoon is a psychedelic, esoteric trip. So if you ever get a chance to just watch that show, it's very bizarre in and of itself.
My brand new robot Cobra. La 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 la. I want to thank everybody for visiting us in the chat group and watching. All of those who will listen to it later when they're doing whatever they're doing. And you know what? We'll try to give it to you guys next week. But thank you guys. Hit the bell so you get notified whenever we do schedule it. And once again, Frank, is fun just kicking it with you, bro.
It
As
really
always.
is. I enjoy it. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again later. Take
Have a
it
good
easy.
day, everybody. Holler if you have questions. Holler at
All
your
right.
boy.
Keep it cracking.
Yes.